Testing, there we go. Is that good? Does that sound good, everyone? All right. We're going to go ahead and get started because I have a lot of content. First off, just out of curiosity, who has the VMs downloaded and ready to go? A handful of you or so. Okay. So the nice thing we have is in the back, we have kind of a cheat sheet for this class, and it has all the commands and everything for this class. So if you're not following along with me as I do it, you can still do it later, perhaps. On the back of it is a cheat sheet for WinDebug, debugger, kernel debugger. That's actually for Wayland Grange's class. That's Wednesday or Thursday morning, I think. So you can use the same cheat sheet and come back for Wayland's class. He's really smart, so it should be a good course for him too. WinDebug. I'm going to go and get started as people are filing in here still because we got a lot of content. So first off, this workshop is brought to you by Blue Coat Systems, my work, and my ulcer. So the people who know me know that I've had a little health trouble lately. The malware gods do not want me to give this talk. I was diagnosed with an ulcer about a month ago. I've been getting treatment for that ulcer. And then I went to the hospital last Friday, which they said, oh, you don't have an ulcer, you have a kidney stone. And so I have a kidney stone as well. Who's had a kidney stone? Yeah, that's terrible. They start in the back, and I can tell you he's like right here right now, and he's starting to move. So I'm going to try to get through this workshop as best I can. I am medicated. I am heavily drugged. I remember going to DEF CON and watching the people take shots as they gave talks and thinking, I'll never do anything like that. That's so unprofessional. And now I'm drugged up and giving my own talk. So if I fall, that's a warning to you guys. I might fall on my face. That's my arm this morning from the nurse at the emergency room who was not able to find my vein. So at 5 o'clock at Friday night, at 1 in the morning, you do not get the best nurses, apparently. So my name's Jeffrey Doty. I'm a malware analyst for Blue Coat Systems, malware analysis forensics, all that jazz. I have certifications. More about me, I like board games. Who plays board games? All right, I was going to bring some to the con, but I forgot to do them. I also play paintball, and I do BattleBots now. We have a BattleBots community that's kind of growing in Provo. We do these smaller BattleBot competitions. Is really cool, so I'm interested in that. But basically, this workshop came about because the SaneCon people kind of pressured me to do this workshop. Is Kelly in here? Oh, good. But he said, "Oh yeah, you do malware in your sleep. You should do a malware course." And I thought, yeah, I could do that. It's a lot of content though, and I wanted this to be practical. So what we're going to do in this workshop is we're going to go from top to bottom of a full incident. So we're going to be doing memory analysis. We're going to do the network side. We're going to try to do as much as possible to do a full incident. It's a lot, but we're going to try. So that's what we're doing. We're going to do what we call triage forensics. So it's memory forensics and collecting volatile data. We're going to touch on network forensics, and we're going to touch on malware analysis, doing behavioral analysis on malware and a little bit of static analysis on malware. It's a lot of content. We will touch on theory, but I have a lot of content, so I can't deep dive into it. I don't want to discourage questions. I would much rather have you asking questions and having interactions, stuff like that. But just be aware I am short on time, so I'm going to go quick. But go ahead and ask those questions. So this is the obligatory slide of we are dealing with live malware. These are malware samples that I get from work. So they're fresh, they're live. They don't shoot yourself in the foot. That's what that slide is, because we are dealing with live stuff. The VMs that you have what you call the SIFT workstation. It comes from SANS. It's a forensics workstation. And then another SANS instructor made one called Remnix, Reverse Engineering Malware Linux. And it's got a lot of good malware tools. And then they made the script so that you can install one on the other. So the VM you have is Sift Workstation and Remnix, which equals something someone hasn't come up with a name yet, but it's both of them, which is nice. And then there is a Windows 7 VM on there to do the behavioral analysis and some of the static analysis on there. So that's the VMs we have. A couple things on the VMs I didn't get time to get to. You will need to turn off Windows Defender. The sample we're going to play with, Windows Defender he doesn't catch it per se. He only catches a portion of it that tries to do something that I won't give away. So you have to turn off Windows Defender so the sample will run. And then these two links here, one is for the worksheet back here so you can get a digital copy. And then the other one is for a separate worksheet with just links. So it has all the links to all the tools that we talk about and other websites that we talk about. Again, so you can go back and do this again on your own time. So our goals today. So to simplify malware analysis and forensics is quite hard. But I did find one place where they can give a good, simple goals to malware analysis and what we're trying to do. And it's essentially these four things. So what are the artifacts of execution? What is the impact of execution, and especially in my own environment? So we're going to look at the stuff it interacts with, the programs it looks for. Is that in my environment? Does it matter? And then what are the hosted network indicators? So it's a simple methodology, simple framework that we can use when we're doing basic malware analysis. And then why triage forensics? Not many people talk about this. Triage forensics may be completely new to a lot of people in this room, or the idea of, but and let me explain it a couple ways. So Dr. Eric Cole is one of the SANS instructors, and he's very big on security cannot impede on business. And everyone in this room probably has a story where if you impede business, you're going to lose, you're going to get upset. You can't go to them and say, I want to take down this web server, I want to take away these credentials. And everyone gets upset. I had a friend when I first got my job at Blue Coat Systems. I said, oh, I work for security, and he told me, oh yeah, just don't make it hard on people. We had a new security guy come into our company. He shut off access to all of our customer files to everyone in the company, and we lost 2 customers doing it. It's like, oh, okay. So, when security impedes business, it doesn't work. And then the other big thing that the SANS instructors are really pushing on now is the fact that disk forensics is almost dead. And we'll get into that a little bit. And I want to explain that principle, I'm going to go to an NBC hack. Did anyone know that NBC was hacked in 2011? Of course, you work for me. Not a big story, because not really any proprietary information was stolen. What happened was, at one point, we started seeing malicious traffic coming from NBC.com. And what happened is NBC.com's web server was hacked by the Red Kit and the Impact exploit kit group. So people were going to NBC.com, and they were getting malware on their machines from these exploit kits. Red Kit was a popular one at the time. Impact was not as much. Impacts wasn't resolving their servers, so they didn't notice that one. But it was kind of a big deal, because from our perspective, we had to think, from Blue Coat, what do we do? If we mark NBC.com as suspicious or malicious, because it kind of was, how much traffic do you think NBC.com gets worldwide and from all the people who have our Blue Coat products? It's probably a ton, so we'd be impacting customers like crazy. We ended up having to mark NBC.com as suspicious for like an hour, I believe. And we had to justify it to our customers that no, there is malware on this server and we can't contain it, and so we have to block it. So that happened. I think it went on for like probably 4 or 5 hours maybe, and then they cleaned it off. And then a couple weeks later, it happened again. But it wasn't just NBC.com at this time. It was JimmyFallon.com. It was Late Night Show this or whatever. Any other website that was associated with NBC.com, they were also distributing malware. So now it's getting worse. And it was a big deal at the time, and then they shut it down and cleaned it up a bit. But then it got even worse. So this domain right here, and if you go to NBC, this domain will still load on your machine in the background. They infected this server. And what we figured this is this stands for NBC Universal digital advertisement operations. It's an internal advertisement server for all of NBC Universal. So these guys were able to be in the network long enough to recognize this. They stuck their malware and their malicious JavaScript on these servers. And those servers display ads on everything owned by NBC Universal. So we started getting malicious traffic, not just from NBC or TV shows, but from Fandango.com, NHL.com. I mean, think about NBC Universal as a large, large company. And so it was almost brilliant. It was a brilliant attack because of how widespread that server goes. And then eventually they did take down that domain because I think they had to point to contain it. That they had to contain it somehow. So they took down that domain, and that was the last we saw of malicious traffic on NBC. But my point with triage forensics is this could have been solved by triage forensics. Now I'm speculating because I'm not working for NBC. But more than likely, their security team saw something was going on with these web servers. We need to do something. We want to figure it out. So what do? You do forensics. Okay, well, I have to take down your web server and do a disk image, a full disk image of your web server. And how long do you think that takes for a pretty big web server like that? Hours, maybe if not the whole day. So you go to your boss at work and say, I want to take down your web server for the whole day. Is that going to go over well? No, probably not. So that's where triage forensics comes in, and that's why we're saying, people are saying these days that, you know, disk forensics is almost dead because it just has too much of an impact on customer business. So triage forensics, which I'm kind of clarifying as is memory dumps and just taking off files off the server, you can pretty much get done as most of what you would get done with a full disk image anyways. You can accomplish most of your goals, and you can do it remotely. You can pull the memory remotely. You can pull all these triage files remotely, and then you don't have to do any customer impact. So to start with memory forensics, the first thing we have to worry about is the order volatility. So we have data. It's like a crime scene almost, and we don't want to screw up the data. We don't want to screw it up. Nobody laughs from this? No one gets what this is from? Anyone? Mr. Bean, yeah. I thought it was funny. Mr. Bean sneezes on a famous portrait and ruins it. And that's what we have to make sure we don't do it. So there's an order of volatility. The data on those infected machines or servers that we're going to image and do forensics on, we could screw up that data quite easily. So memory is the first one we want to grab. And memory forensics is really an interesting field, and it's a really up-and-coming field. And the reason why is because the more malware tries to hide, the more it kind of becomes visible. You know, so like the more malware tries to run, it becomes visible. So if you want to run and you're doing memory forensics, you kind of, the first thing that happens, we notice you. You become very obvious when you start to do memory forensics. It's a gold mine. And memory is so big these days that it's almost like a different disk. So you're basically doing disk forensics just on memory almost. Most malware runs only in memory. Meterpreter only runs in memory. And how old is Meterpreter these days? So a lot of malware just runs in memory only. So if you want the data, it's going to be in memory. And then one of the nice things about memory forensics is it beats encryption, it beats obfuscation, it beats packed files. Packers in malware can be quite difficult to unpack, and they're a pain in the butt. But in memory, it's running. So it's already unpacked itself, it's already unencrypted himself. So if we can just let the malware run and then dump that file, dump the executables, we can beat all that, and it doesn't matter what encryption they have or obfuscation they have. It's quite nice. And then there's lots of other fun stuff that runs in memory. So your passwords are all in memory. Your clipboard is in memory. So when you're doing memory forensics, you can find some really fun stuff just by looking for it. Newish field of study. So the point is we never want to shut down an infected machine, and that used to be the standard policy for forensics. Is you take a picture of the desktop and you unplug it so you can do a disk image, and that's basically a big no-no these days. With how much we've done with memory forensics, you never shut down the machine until you can dump the memory. So memory dumping. So there's lots of different tools to do them. I use Monsol's dumpit.exe. You just put it on a really large USB, just run it from command line, and it will just dump all that memory to your USB. You never want to dump it to disk, because if you dump it to disk, you're overwriting the memory that you're trying to save. So never dump it to disk. And there's other ways to get memory that are quite interesting. So hibernation files, they basically have their memory saved in there as well. So you can pull out hibernation files and grab the memory. Memory dumps, if they make memory dumps. But in these labs, we're going to be using VMware snapshots. So every time you make a snapshot in VMware, it creates a .vmem file, and basically that's memory. That's just the raw memory. And the tools we're using parses that just beautifully. So we can just take snapshots and use those snapshots. So tools we're going to be using, there's Volatility. That's really the guy who started it all. Andrew Case and Michael Lay, they started all this field. There is Recall. Recall is a fork of Volatility. Recall is used in the Google Rapid Response tool that Google released, so it's kind of nice. Most of the same commands we use in Volatility today will work in Recall. Redline is a Windows tool. It's a GUI application. It's kind of the point-and-click memory forensics. It's kind of nice at times. I'm sure there's others. I'm sure there's more expensive commercial tools you can buy. I know HB Gary has one, but we're just going to stick with Volatility. And these are the basic processes we're going to go through with memory analysis. You look at network connections, because we can see who it was talking to at the time the memory dumped. We can see who it was recently talking to, even if the network's closed. That still resides in memory. And then we're going to look at the processes. We're going to look at stuff running on the computer when we dump the memory, and what can we figure out by looking at those processes. And then you can even dump those processes and do malware analysis and all that. So Volatility. Here is our basic Volatility commands right here. So vol.py, putting in the location of the memory image. You have to do a profile. And then pslist is your first command. And we're going to break this down and get used to typing, because there's a lot of typing in this. So the first one is that file location. You have to put in the file location. And this is exactly what it will look like in your VMs that you've downloaded. It's best to do it from sudo to have escalated privileges. But there is a cheater's way, because we don't want to type that much. So you can do environmental variable, so export volatility location, and then put the memory image, and then you never have to type that again. So if you do an analysis on the same memory image over and over and over again, just export that environmental variable, and then you're good. Same thing with the profile. So the profile right here is a Windows 7 without a service pack, 64-bit. Different operating systems have different memory structures, so you have to make sure you're reading it from the right memory structure. And there's a command for that. So this image info, volatility.py image info, we'll try to parse that and try to make a best determination of, I think it's this profile, Windows profile or Linux or whatever. And then we can do that too with environmental variables. So export volatility profile, Win7 64. And then we never have to type that again. So we take the top there, and then we can make it to this. So this is the only thing we have to type, vol.py pslist. A lot easier, right? Okay. So here's the process commands to find out the different things that are running. pslist is basically your task list, or task manager. So if you were in the Windows machine and you hit Task Manager, it's the same as seeing as pslist. psscan scans something that's called the eProcess list. So when your computer is running processes, they're all connected through this eProcess list, and each process connects to another. The problem with that is a lot of rootkits, what they'll try to do is they'll start a new process, but then they'll disconnect themselves from all the other processes, so you just have this rogue process out there. And then when you bring up Task Manager, he just follows all those links. So Task Manager looks at it and says that process, malicious process.exe doesn't exist. It's not there. But you know better with memory forensics. So it will scan the eProcess section and not be dependent on the links. The other thing it can find by doing that is stopped processes. So if a process recently stopped, it will still be there in memory, and you can see that from the PS scan. PS tree shows parent processes, shows it in kind of like a tree format like you would Process Explorer or something like that. PS total compares, and PSX view as well, compares different scans. So if you have a process that's hiding, you can see from 3 or 4 different scans of which one is showing it, which one's not, can help you determine if you've got a rootkit or not. And there's also a cheater's way. So we can put everything to this dot format, and it will make a visual image of all the processes. So these are the 2 commands, and they're on your worksheet as well. Spitting it out into a dot format, and then using this dot command to put it in a visual process. And it gives you something like this. And boy, that cannot be seen from here, can it? Well, everyone's got the slides. So, but what it does is it shows us the parent process and all the processes that spawn from it. So this big guy up here is more than likely services.exe. And then these red ones are stopped processes or unlinked processes. Like we said, the rootkit can unlink the process so it can't be seen. So we can quickly see processes of interest that we might be curious about. So what do we look for when we're doing memory forensics? We're looking for something that stands out and doesn't look like it belongs there. Who's caught it so far? Yeah, it took me a few seconds and I was upset when I found it. But it's actually a really good metaphor for doing memory forensics. In memory forensics, a lot of them try to blend in. Rootkits aren't as popular as anymore as they used to be. The more I modify your machine, the more I'm going to get noticed. So what they really want to do is they want to blend in with the rest of your machine. And so that's what we're looking for, is we have to find stuff that doesn't belong or doesn't quite belong or look right. And that's where we get these what to look for, and this is on your cheat sheet. But we look for the image name. So is it a legitimate process? So you're familiar with services.exe and svchost.exe, but if it's some weird process.exe, does it belong there? The path. So it could be svchost.exe, a legitimate process, but it's not in Windows system or System 32. All legitimate SVC hosts would be in Systems 32. The parent process is the same, command line. Start time, a lot of these services start at boot up. But if this one started 20 minutes ago, where all these other ones started at boot up, maybe that's a concern. It's a lot to know. So this is a really good blog from a forensics guy. He worked for Mandy at one point. But you have to know what good looks like to know what evil looks like. So, and that links in the document with the links. But he does a really good job of breaking down what does legitimate processes look like. What are the legitimate parent processes for svchost.exe or lsas.exe? And so then you can determine if something is wrong or bad. So that brings us to our first exercise. I'd like to take probably like 10 minutes or so and do our first exercise. You have incident1.vmem in your folder. So you take that to your SANS or your SIFT workstation, whatever we're calling it, and start up Volatility, and you can run those scans. It's all on your cheat sheet of which of the commands. And I want you to find the illegitimate process. There is a process running on that infected memory image that is not working. So we'll give you like 10 minutes for that. Go ahead and ask questions if you have them. Try to help as much as I can. So while you guys are doing it, I'll do it myself just to give you a sense of how it works. So that's PS list right there. So that's the first command for PS list. What I like to do is spit them out to a file. So do the same command, but just spit it out to a pslist.txt. And I've already got one. It's a little bit easier to analyze than what a command line would look like. So you see here, here's all our system processes. Here's the location in memory where they start. Process ID, the parent process ID, and start times. So you can start to search through this and find what it would look like. Let's see, here's our PS scan. So this one even shows closed processes. So here's the time exited. Google update exited. What else? Oh, and here's a PS total one. So here's what those images look like when you do it in a dot format. So here's explorer.exe, the main process for everything GUI in your Windows. And here's all the things that spawned. And there's the Google updates that I've already closed. Parent ID there. So we can start looking through and trying to find our malicious process. How's everyone doing? Who's got the VMs up and working? Doing this? Should I keep going or should I let you, do you want time to do the exercises? Working on them? Okay, I'll shut up. Give you like 5 more minutes and then we'll kind of do it as a group. Does anyone have a candidate? Anyone know what the malicious process is? The one that doesn't belong? Anyone? Yell it out. This is a workshop. We're working together. Nobody? I know it's a short amount of time, but for lack of time, we don't have a ton. I am going to say that the malicious process is right up here on the screen. Does anyone see anything that doesn't belong? Has a wrong name, it has a wrong parent. Anyone? Go ahead. You change your mind? All right, anyone else? This is really the most difficult part about forensics in general, malware analysis in general, is you have to know what good looks like. So you have to look at a lot of Windows processes. You have to know which ones are legitimate. When I first did this incident, um, um, I thought it was this guy. And then as I did a little bit of Googling, because that's really what we just do in this industry, isn't it? We just Google stuff. That's actually a legitimate process. The malicious one is the syshost.exe. That does not belong. There is no legitimate syshost.exe. But see how it blends in really well with the rest of it? See, we don't really see too many rootkits anymore because it's too hard to catch them, especially user land rootkits. So that's the malicious process there. So one of the first things people started doing when they were doing memory forensics is, well, knowing the good is really difficult, so why don't we just diff things? Why don't we have like a good, clean baseline image and then take an memory image of an infected machine and compare the two and see where they go wrong? And that there is legitimate cause for that. So in your incident files, there is a baseline.vmem. And what that is that's a memory dump of a clean image of the same computer. So a clean, non-infected machine. So what you can do is you can run the same scans, pscan, pslist, and all those things against the clean memory image, and then compare them to the infected one to see, well, what changed or what's different. And then, of course, you want to automate that. So people have begun to automate that a little bit. There's a tool called Voldiff that one of the SANS instructors did. And this is what the output looks like a bit. Okay, so first I have to... So this is what it outputs. And basically what it does, it will take two images, a clean image and an infected image, and it runs all these different scans against it. And each in one of these is the baseline scan, the infected, and the diff. But then it produces a nice report for you. So it'll say, here's the PS list command, and here's all the processes that are new. And this one is actually not the same incident we were working with on this workshop. This came from Neutrino exploit kit was dropping a torrent locker ransomware. The malicious process on this one is this guy right here. That's your torrent locker process running. But the reason why we didn't do it for this one is because I was coming across a problem with running this tool against our incident. The output, I can show you the output. Come on. Comes back with just about everything. And I had a hard time trying to figure out why that is. And I think once I figured it out, I wanted to kick myself. But it's a good lesson on how we could never rely on one set of tools or anything like that. So the incident we're dealing with right now, the malware we're dealing with, ironically does have a rootkit component to it. It does install a kernel rootkit. And the final thing it does to install that kernel rootkit is it has to reboot itself. So you're going to see this when we do the behavioral analysis, that we'll run the malware and he will run and then he's going to reboot himself eventually. What does that do to your memory when you reboot? It clears it, so it's kind of gone. So we have our baseline image, and then the machine rebooted and we took the image again, but because of things like ASLR, address space randomization, all of these services now have a different location in memory. So when you do the diffing, tools like Voldiff look at them and say, well, they're all different because they're all different processes coming from different locations. And that would be true if we hadn't rebooted the machine, but because this certain piece of malware reboots himself, we lost all that data. So memory forensics does have a few setbacks, and a few issues. I was thinking about forking that tool and just running it purely based on the names. Um, it's not foolproof because you can still have a malicious SVC host that's has DLL injection into it or process injection, but at least it would give us something. So that's memory forensics. So we took an infected image, and we were able to determine that yes, there's something bad here. There's a process running here that doesn't belong, and then we can do other things to it. So let's go back to this. So you'll see on your worksheet that there's a bunch of other commands you can do. There's DLL list. So if you're afraid that it's a legitimate process that has DLL injection, or they inject a malicious DLL into the process, you can dump all the DLLs that are running on that process, and you can see if there's a DLL that doesn't belong there. Handles, as well as the handles for the process. Let's try a couple of those. DLL list, and then you have to do the process ID, and it was 1556 on this one. So here's the different DLLs that are loaded on that process. Nothing special on that one. So there's our sys host. You can look for mutexes. Pretty much anything. You can look for a ton of stuff. If you just Google volatility plugins, you can get a list on the internet of all the different plugins. Most of the big ones are on there. But for what's most interesting and most effective, I think, is we can actually dump the process. So we have our command here. We know it's 1556 is our sys host that doesn't belong there. So we can do proc dump and the process 1556, and then output directory and dump it to our desktop. Okay. It's on the cheat sheet there. What did I miss? Output directory, is it? Anyone? Single minus capital D. Nope, still not it. Process output directory. What's the error it's giving me? Huh. Oh well. Demo gods, I guess. It's on your cheat sheet. I'm pretty sure I had it right the first time. Let's just Google it real quick, shall we? Utility proc dump. Proc dump. Oh, -D. Okay. But anyways, what it gives us is we can, stop that. All right, where am I? We can output a file, and we can actually pull that from memory. And I have that here, executable 1556, right there. Then we can take that, go to virus total. There's our executable. And then right there we have our malware. So it's scoring 31 out of 56 on virus total. And we can start to get a sense of what the malware is. A bunch of them don't know what there is, but there is a common, least common denominator in here. Neckers, 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 Neckers. So what this is Zeus Neckers. It's the Zeus banking Trojan, but it has a kernel rootkit called Neckers attached to it. So that's kind of like a bonus question. So one of the commands in your cheat sheet is driver scan. So you can look at all the drivers that are loaded on the computer, and they have loaded a malicious driver on there. So that's kind of like a bonus. You can go back and find the malicious driver. So, but we have an executable now that we pulled out of memory. We've confirmed that the computer's infected. We know it's a malicious executable. We've pulled it from memory, And now we can start to do more analysis on it and figure out what we're doing. Any questions so far? We're going pretty quick, and everyone's really quiet. Anything? No. Okay. All right, so where are we? So triage forensics. So the next step. So what else can we do with triage forensics? So we've dumped the memory. These are some of the other files that are useful for doing kind of triage forensics. They can tell us 80% of what's going on in the computer. This is a lot as well, and we won't have time to dive into every single one of these, but we're going to dive into a few of them that are most helpful. The first one, well, first we can get this from a tool called Triage IR, and this is a really nifty tool. This is another thing you'd have on your large volume USB. Basically, it runs as an executable, and you can just click and select all the different things you can dump. You can even dump memory this way. You can dump all these files from the last slide, and then you can do your traditional disk forensics that you'd normally do. One we're going to talk about more in detail is Autoruns. Who's played with Autoruns before? Really nifty tool. So malware needs to be persistent. Once it gets on your computer, it runs, but then it needs to have persistence so it can keep running every time. So if you reboot your computer, you turn it off. When you start back up, he needs to run again, so he's always running on your computer. What Autoruns does, and it's a tool from Microsoft sysinternals, is it scans your computer and looks for all the different ways your software can be persistent on your computer. So at the very top there's the run key in your registry. So it runs every time your computer boots up. Services are also a very popular one as well. And they've made a few improvements on this recently that have been really nifty. So this score over here on the very right, it will take a hash of the file and submit them to VirusTotal. So you can start to see if any of these files that are persistent on your computer have VirusTotal hits. Does any vendor think they're malicious? And then what else you can do is say, there's a ton of them. And again, this is where knowing good from evil helps, is you can say, well, I trust the Microsoft certs. So anything that's certified by Microsoft has a Microsoft cert on it. Just ignore that and drop that from it. And ignore the common Windows ones. And we can take a big giant list from that and we can narrow it down to only a few. And so we can see here, I have a couple of false positives on some Windows Defender stuff. But then up here on the top, under the services, we see our syshost. syshost.exe/service. That's the command line parameters, which means he's running as a service on the computer. And we can see that he's being persistent. So that's kind of nifty. So now we have the persistence mechanism. We have a malicious process, we have malicious executable, we know how he's remaining persistent on the computer. The other thing we can do is you can take snapshots. So you can run it on a clean machine, and your files have this as well. They have a clean Autoruns. And then you can compare it to a new Autorun. So if you were on the infected computer, you could run Autoruns and compare it to a clean one, and it will show you the difference. It will do a diff and show you the differences. So Autoruns is a really nifty tool. There is a guy here who's doing a talk on Friday about instant response with sysinternals. He's going to go much more in depth on the sysinternals tools than I'm going to, just for lack of time. It should be really cool. They've also created one called Sysmon, which is essentially a lot of this information in a more enterprise format, I guess. Is that what you'd call it? But go to that on Friday because that would be good. That's a really good companion talk to this one. And then there's other files, and these files that we gather with Triage IR, they can show sometimes execution of malware. So prefetch is every time anything runs on your computer, there's a prefetch file created in a prefetch folder. Same thing with jump lists and links are kind of similar. So we can start to parse some of those and get more evidence of execution. A lot of things in forensics is having multiple cases against something. So you don't want to rely on one thing to say, oh, I know it's malicious because of this one thing. You want to gather as much info as possible. So we have memory forensics that we know it's a malicious process. We have virus total, we have persistence, and then if we go and we can find the prefetch for that, we're getting more and more evidence against this file that we know it was on this computer, we know it was running, and we know it's bad. Okay, so now we're gonna jump into network forensics. Any questions on that so far? To you quiet group of InfoSec professionals? No? Okay, so network forensics. This is the kill chain. What we've been talking about so far has been mostly like the install is persistence and weaponized exploit. Kill chain is, or the network forensics, we're going to be talking mostly about delivery and C2. So we know this computer's infected, but how did it get infected? And on your incident files, you have a PCAP there, and we're going to find that out. So how do we do network forensics? There's a ton of stuff we can do. All the way from doing flow data and your IDS and all that. There's expensive tools that my company sells. If you're cheap or don't have the money, Security Onion is a great tool. All these open source tools wrapped up in a little distro. And I have to give a shout out to the SANS courses because this is where I've learned a lot of this stuff. These are also a couple really good resources, especially Applied Network Security Modern. It really goes deep into like flow analysis and stuff like that. But we're going to do the quick and dirty way. These are the tools I use for just quick and dirty network forensics, just to give me a really quick view of what's happening. This first one's Cap Tipper. It's got a lot of functionality to it, and we're not going to use a lot of it because of time restraints. But I just want to show you a little bit of what it can do. What it does is it parses out the different conversations that were happening in that PCAP. And that can be really nice. This is a screenshot from one of our internal tools at Blue Coat. And to show you how complex this can really get really quickly, this is 15 minutes of network traffic from one client of ours, just one computer. So it starts here. This is a screenshot going down. And so all these little lines and connections are different refers. So they went to this website, and this website loaded these 4 different websites. And you'll see how big and complex this can be. And just looking at this in a tool like Wireshark can just be really overwhelming. So we're still going, we're still going, we're still going, and we're still going. See how complex this is getting? So this is, and this is just our internal tool, but just for fun's sake, all these red dots, these are websites that we have rated malicious at Blue Coat in our GIN intelligence network. So this was one client who hit this one website, exploded all these other websites, and hit all these malicious traffic all at once because of this one website. So what Cap Tipper will do, and that's the command up there, is he will spit out a report similar to that. He will spit out a report of here's all the different network connections it made, here's the different conversations, and it will even try to do kind of a graph flow of just like the one before of you hit this website and it loaded these other websites, and you can start to piece together a puzzle of what was going on here. The other one is Fiddler. Fiddler is a really nifty tool. It's a web proxy. Think of it as Burp Suite's little brother, if anyone's used Burp. It can parse web traffic really nicely, and you can feed it PCAPs. So you feed it a PCAP, and then he's all nice and good, and it can parse through it. So let's look a little bit at Fiddler. Where is... So in your incident files, incident 1, you can take this first PCAP, and we're going to take it to our Windows machine. Don't know what that is. But here's Fiddler. And it's doing something already. So what we can do is we can remove all the traffic if we want to, that big X up there. And say, let's get rid of it. And import sessions. And this is a PCAP. And it's frozen. Boy, demo gods do not like me today, do they? Alright, let's go to our other VM. So this is the SaintCon one. This is the one you have. And you have the same tools on here. So under web, nope. Network, there we go, Fiddler. And with this resolution, this is going to be wonderful. File, import sessions from, well, we could probably just click and drag this on here. Nope, he doesn't like that. All right, import from a PCAP. Find our PCAP. This is terrible. Ugh. All right, let's reboot this guy because he's struggling. All right, here we go, Fiddler. So we went from too big to too small. Oh well. So import a packet capture, desktop, packet capture, there we go. So then we see on the left here is our network traffic. And on the right we can inspect it. So this tab here, inspectors. And usually they use this encoding just to pack it, make it smaller, so you just unclick that. And then you can see everything. So here's the original website that they went to that was compromised. And here's all the HTML and the JavaScript and everything. And then you can start to piece together a puzzle of what happened. So this domain here, and it's way too small, but it has a document.write, so they're loading that malicious website here. And then you can see here, this is part of Neutrino exploit kit. And here's loading all the bad stuff. And these days, most of the exploit kits are encrypted, so we won't see too much amazing stuff. But you can see the size of the file, and you can even see a process. If you're running it on your computer yourself, you can even see the process making the call out. So if it's Internet Explorer, that makes sense. But let's say, malware got on your machine and SVC host was making a call out to certain IPs and domains. Well, that would show up here, and that wouldn't be too pretty. So this is a pretty simple one. So here's the exploit kit. And then this is what the malicious traffic looks like, the CNC traffic for Zeus knackers. You also have one called pizza here in your files. So let's look at pizza. So it's a saved Fiddler session, so you can just open this one up. Maybe not. Let's clear that file. Remote Fiddler. So this is what traffic will really look like when they're hitting all sorts of different websites and you have to parse through these different conversations. And what you can start to do is you can search. So you can do a Control F, and you can search for anything you want to. So if we know the name of the malicious domain that it just hit, we can search for that domain, and it will pop up with these yellow highlights of, well, this is where it came from. And then you can dig into that and find the JavaScript. You can even pull out the files. So a lot of these things we're seeing here are images. So you can go to image view and see the images, but then we can right click, copy, or save response body, and we can save any file from the PCAP and save it out. So if we want to look at the malicious JavaScript more, see how that works, we can find the malicious JavaScript, extract it, and look at it more. This one's called Pizza, because this one, they hit a malicious site up here somewhere, and then they hit Angler exploit kit, and it drops a payload called BDEP, which does a lot of click fraud. And so that's why this is such a noisy PCAP here, is because of all the click fraud that's happening. And then down here, if we search for pizza, he hits this domain, and you can barely see it, but it's sausage.pizza, and that's the website. .pizza is a legitimate TLD now, and all the legitimate TLDs have exploded. There's a billion of them. But if we look at the content for this network call, the text, all it says is, yeah, pizza bro. And that's it. I don't know why. I think it's probably has something to do with the click fraud, but they just haven't got the server up and running yet and fully what they want it to do. So it just says, oh, here we go. Yeah, you changed on me now. So this is the CNC traffic for BDEP. See how large it is? And see Internet Explorer. But then this stuff right here is more CNC traffic, but the process making those calls out is explorer.exe. Explorer should not be talking out to the network like that. So that's BDEP CNC server. And then there's our sausage.pizza. And that's a legitimate website. I do not suggest you go to that website. We have a marked malicious in blue coat, but it's a legitimate website that it had. So that's a little just fun Easter egg that we found doing this. So that's kind of our network forensics. That's a cheap and really easy, dirty way to do network forensics. It parses your PCAP really nicely as long as you can get that PCAP, take your full network capture. You can send it to these tools and they parse it out real nicely, faster than you would if you were doing it through Wireshark or something like that. So what to look for when we're looking at malicious traffic? We're trying to find CNC traffic. You can kind of parse all web traffic out to kind of three things. This is roughly, you have the website traffic, like the HTML pages, the JavaScript pages, the images. Those all belong to a certain website. Often they'll load stuff from content servers. So content server is just a server out there that just loads images often, or JavaScript and things like that. And then you have web ad analytics, which is my best friend. They that show the ads on the side. They're my best friend because they're very noisy and they make it difficult to do network forensics. But they also do this thing we call malvertising, where bad guys will take out a legitimate ad from a legitimate company, but then they'll put malware on it instead of a legitimate ad. And so you go to this big popular website and the ads all load on the side, but then you get malware all of a sudden. So web ads. I'm not a big fan of web ads, but that's kind of what you look for when you look at web traffic. You can parse it into these different things. And pay attention to those chains of events. So you can see a malicious site, or you think it's a malicious site. How did that site get there? So look at the JavaScript a little bit, do a search. Most of the time you can find in plain text on different JavaScript pages a link to that site. They'll do a document.write or something like that, and that JavaScript was loaded from a different site, and eventually it takes you to the original compromised site, whatever it was, where they inserted JavaScript onto that website. And then pull out those files and analyze them and see what you can do with them. Say goodbye to your innocence because the internet's full of crap. Once you start to really dive deep into the internet, you start to see how bad things are and how noisy things are. Especially when it comes to things like malvertising. pretty much name a big giant web ad company out there. Um, DoubleClick, Ad Yield Manager, Yahoo, all these ones that are doing advertisements, all of them are pretty much guilty by association for malvertising and malware. They've all malvertised. There really is no good web ad company that has a clean record. Um, they all kind of are involved. I recently did a blog post about this for work, and I haven't gotten it published yet because legal's afraid of naming too many names about malvertising and web ad companies. But you start to see a lot of bad stuff when you look at this. So that brings us to our next exercise. So you have the PCAP files that we looked at. You can open up the pizza.zaz, and you can find the original compromised website and start searching through that. You can find the CNC traffic for BDEP, as well as in that same PDEP, in that same PCAP, BDEP will download more malware. He downloads a sample called Vodtrack, and you can start to see that CNC traffic too. So take a second, load those up in your Windows VM, and see what you see. Okay? And I'll be glad to answer questions if anyone has any. All right, we're going to run through a little bit of that PCAP and see what we can find together. First, to get out of that. So on the left here, you have kind of like a packet number. It's not really packets, but maybe line number. So we're down here about like 138. And if you look at that, we're at this website, besthealthandwellness.com. These are a bunch of images and things like that. Going down here, here's some web ad stuff going on. Our first real indication of something bad is this right here. TielsonJosephReeden.com, whatever. Boards view talk about PHP, and you can see it's quite a large. It's 147 kilobytes. It's quite a large packet. And I'm trying to get this to work on my resolution here. So if we were to look at the JavaScript on here, you would see a bunch of gibberish JavaScript. You can see it on your own. And what Angular Exploit Kit does is they'll have a bunch of obfuscated JavaScript to hide what they're doing, and they would inject in between that legitimate text from different books. So in the past, they've been using Pride and Prejudice, so they'll just inject like a page or two of Pride and Prejudice in there. If you look on this one in your Fiddler, I can't do it with my resolution, but this time they stuck in Frankenstein. So there's a bunch of text from Frankenstein. If you Google it, it's the first thing that pops up is Frankenstein. And I haven't figured out why they do this. I think it just must be a way to evade AVs, that if AV looks at it and sees legitimate ASCII text and English words, that it must think it's legitimate or something like that. But it's not. That's our malicious JavaScript. So if you do Control F, you can search for, well, where else does this show up? So we can say Joseph L. Breeden, and we find more. So if we scroll down, we find more of it. You see the symbol over here shows that it's a Flash file. So that's our Flash exploit right there. And again, we could save response body, and we could save that Flash file. And so that's probably our exploit, so we'd look at that. But if we go up and we try to find out what's the chain of events, how did this show up? It also flags this file right here. And this is a completely different domain. This is brown.remainyoungforever.com, airportquotes.js. So if we save that and we look at that a little bit more, quotes.js. Let's open it with WordPad. That's the JavaScript from that page. So it's an iframe, which basically just loads another website in the background. And the source is our josephlbreenin.com. This is our Angular Exploit Kit domain. And then we could search for more for what loaded this website. But if you do that, it doesn't really come up with anything. Oh, it did. And we keep finding more and more chains to find where it loaded. And eventually you'll find out that this bestwealthandwellness.com, this was a legitimate website that was compromised. And so they stuck this malicious JavaScript that loaded this brown.remainforever.young, which was just an iframe that loaded this site, which is your Angular exploit kit. And then he loads some Flash exploits. And if we go down, we go down, we go down, we go down. No, I lost it. Breeden. It's another big file he downloads. Here's another Flash file he's downloading, so another exploit. And then look at this big file. This is probably our executable here. It will be encrypted, so there's not much we can do from a network perspective. That's where the memory forensics comes in handy, because it's running on our computer. It's already unencrypted. Um, and then here's another file it downloads. And then this is our first indication of the beat-up malware. This is a legitimate website. This is trading currencies, what it is right here. And you can download this XML file. And it's trading currencies between the dollar and the pound and all these different things. And what beat-up uses that for is it uses it as randomization for its domain generation algorithm, because those are always changing. So good luck in making a regex for his domain generating algorithm with all these changes. And then that's our first indication of the CNC server right there. See this domain right here? One of the big things we look for in network forensics is just what we call weirdo domains, domains that don't make sense. No user on your network is ever going to type that into their browser. It's not legit. And if we were to look at that, and we can right click on that, look at properties, we can see where it resolves to. We could look at the content as well, but it's encrypted as well, and so there's not much to get there. But he loads, he does what we call click fraud. So on your computer, it basically just hits a bunch of websites to get clicks and make money off web ads. And so that's where we get all of this web ad traffic from after that, is doing click fraud. And then later he'll go down and he'll download Votrak later, and I won't give that away. I'll let you guys find that. So that's network forensics in a nutshell. That's a really quick, dirty dive of network forensics. So what we can do, this kind of goes along with the network forensics of what we do when we find domains and IPs that we think might be illegitimate. You can send them to VirusTotal. VirusTotal does look for domains and IP addresses. You can do a search on the VirusTotal instead of doing the URL query for it. It often comes with better data. Blue Coat has what we call site review. So we give categorizations to the vast majority of the internet. So you can go to site review and say, I have this IP address. What does Blue Coat say it is? And we can say, oh, well, it's malicious, or it's a content server, or whatever it is. Passive total is what we call passive DNS data. It basically says, have we had any DNS requests for this IP or this domain in forever long ago? And it's actually a really good source of giving you data of what's going on. And then of course doing just simple things like who is lookup, who owns this domain, what are they doing with it. One of the things you want to look out for with this is privacy whois services. So what they'll do, instead of registering a domain with my name and information and address, these privacy services will register it for you, and you just register for them. So your domain shows up as privacy protect. And so no one knows who you are and what domain you have. And oftentimes the malware authors will use those services to register their domain. So if you find traffic to one of them like that, it's most likely bad. Also, dynamic DNS services are really bad. It's just a quick, easy way to host something. Dyingdns.org is a big one. You'll get a subdomain, so it's your subdomain.dyingdns.org, and you can host it wherever you want, if it's a box underneath your desk or whatever. Malware authors love to abuse those as well. So you start seeing dying DNS requests on your network, then that's probably bad. At Blue Coat, we recommend everyone just flat out block all dynamic DNS. That's one of our categories we categorize web traffic as. So we just recommend you block it 100% because it's all so bad. And then there's a tool called Automator, and Automator tries to kind of automate a lot of that work that I just described. He'll take a domain or an IP address, and he'll do a whois lookup and VirusTotal and all these things, and spits you out a nice report of this is what I think about this domain. More active analysis. There's a tool called URL is a really good tool. Basically sandboxes the machine, so it will go to the website you give it, and it runs it against different IDSs and IPSs and says, well, it went to this, and here's all the different JavaScript it loaded and all the different web traffic it generated. And even if an IDS alerted, like for an exploit kit or for malware, it will show you any IDS alerts. It's really nifty. Thug is like an open source version of that. It's a client honeypot, so it mimics a browser, so it tries to allow anything to exploit it. Um, I I just do it a rough, dirty version, so I have my own virtual machine, um, and I put old software on it. So you can go to oldapps.com and put an old version of Flash on it, an old version of Java, all these things that are getting exploited out in the wild. And then just go out on the internet and start hitting websites, and you'll get exploited pretty quickly. You'll be surprised. The one thing you have to do though is, if you're doing this in like VMware or virtual machine, which I would probably recommend, is you have to scrub that machine of VMware artifacts. A lot of the exploit kits, especially Angler, they look at your files. So with Internet Explorer and ActiveX, they can read the files on your computer. They can even read your system drivers. And if they find VMware drivers, if they find VMware files, they just won't exploit you. They're like, oh, this is a virtual machine, I'm just not interested. So you have to go through and scrub those files out. If it's a virtual machine, like the drivers, just rename the drivers and take a snapshot, and your machine will still work just fine. If you reboot your machine, then it's gonna have trouble because it can't find the right drivers. But that's what I do. It's a lot more fun when you get malware and you find something pop up. It's like Christmas. It's like, yeah, I got malware. Some safer options, I guess, than running on malware on your corporate network wherever you work and all that. Onlinecurl.com will just do a curl request for any domain you want and give you the response. You can combine that with useragentstring.com, so you can select the user agent you want, because exploit kits look at that as well. If I say I'm coming from an Android phone or an iPhone, or if I'm coming from a Linux machine, they just may not be as interested in me. Sometimes they'll send me to Android malware, but most of the time they'll just say, that's not what I'm trying to exploit, so they'll just send me to Google or Amazon.com or something like that and just don't want me. So you go to useragentstring.com and say, well, I am this browser with these settings and stuff, and it will give you the proper user agent so you can see what's going on. Obfuscated JavaScript. So I was telling you, but they obfuscate their JavaScript, so it makes it hard to tell what's going on. The biggest indicator that it's obfuscated is that it's massive, because obfuscating it makes it so much bigger. So there's some automated tools that can crank through that and try to de-obfuscate it a little bit. This, unfortunately, is a cat and mouse game between us and the exploit kit authors. So Wepawet used to be really good in JS Unpack. Now I haven't really had success with them very much. But the Chapman Online JavaScript interpreter is actually pretty nifty. It doesn't automate it fully, but it's kind of like a debugger almost. So you can debug the JavaScript and eventually get to the point where the JavaScript is unpacked and you can see it all. And then JS Beautify there is just, he just makes it look pretty. So it makes all the indents and everything so it looks more readable. JS Detox I haven't played with yet. Guys on my team have. But I've heard that it's one of the better options. And then Thug kind of does it for you as well, but not as much. You can do it manually. So, and there's lots of tools to do this. The best one is actually just the Chrome developer tools. You can debug JavaScript with the Chrome developer tools. So set a breakpoint on where you want it to stop and run it and see what happens. The other one comes from this security researcher, Cow Security. He wrote a tool called Ravello. I don't know how you're supposed to pronounce it. I don't know where he lives, Ravello. I haven't talked to the guy. But it's a JavaScript debugger, essentially, and you can output what you're looking at the breakpoints. Really nifty tool. Those are also on your Windows VMs, so you can take the network PCAP that I gave you of the Angler or the Neutrino exploit kit. You can find the malicious JavaScript, you can exploit it and find and try to unpack it and try to deobfuscate it. It's a lot of trial and error. That's the hardest part about this, is you can try something and it be wrong. It's a dead end. So you just have to try again, essentially. All right, so that brings us to malware analysis. How are we doing? We got like a half hour left. How's everyone's brains? A lot of information, isn't it? Well, hopefully you can do some more work on this and sink it in. So malware analysis. So we want to find out what this does now. We know it's infected, we know where it came from, we know who it talks to, so what is it doing? And we can break it up into a few different things. Doing basic file analysis is kind of just figuring out what's going on, and or more of what do we know about this file on the surface? Because we can actually learn it quite just from the surface level of the file. And then we're going to do behavioral analysis, where we let it run in a controlled environment and we just gather data from it as it runs. And then more static analysis is looking at the code and figuring out what that code does. So the problem with malware analysis, MARE is like malware analysis and reverse engineering, is it's very difficult, and there's not a strong methodology where I can give you where you can do analysis and reverse engineer any sample in there. When I was finishing up my bachelor's, I was determined to find a school that taught reverse engineering or something like that, and I was never able to find it, and I think it's because of that reason. Schools have such trouble updating their content anyways, and they have so much red tape, and this is such an ever-changing field of all the different ways you can write malware that there's really no standard procedures, and higher education or college or university really doesn't like that, because what do they teach besides just give you a sample and let you go at it and trial and error? Can't grade on that. You can't do anything on that. But we can do like a high-level methodology. So you do have your bearings straight, a little bit of orientation before you just dive into it. And we'll talk about that a little bit. The cheater's way is sandboxing. So sandboxing is just taking a sample and running it in this automated tool that will run it and just gather data for you. There's a lot of expensive sandboxes you can buy for your corporate network. For the cheater's way, for the cheap way, malware, whatever how you pronounce that, and Total Hash are probably the best. And they spit you out a decent little report about the different files it made, the registry keys it modified or created, and where the network connections it made. The problem with sandboxes is a lot of the malware these days are trying to detect sandboxes. They're trying to detect that they are in a sandbox and they don't want to be analyzed. This is the code from just a simple dropper that I found. And you can see I renamed a few of the functions, counter 3, counter 4 up there. What it's doing is he's sitting on his butt and he's just counting to 1 billion several different times. And why would he do that? You're going to time out the sandbox eventually. So a lot of malware will use the sleep command. So they'll just sleep for a couple hours on your computer before they do anything. Sandboxes have realized that, so they'll just crank up the system clock. But this isn't using the sleep command. This is just counting. So technically, he is doing stuff. He's just counting to 1 billion. So this would time out a sandbox, because you can't speed that up too much, and it gets past the sandbox. So the sandbox comes back and says, well, nothing happened. But he absolutely is malicious, and has some sandbox detection there, as well as a virtual machine detection. Like I said, with the VMware artifacts, they'll do virtual machine detection, and a lot of sandboxes are virtual machines too. So let's do file identification. So first thing we want to look at basically is it packed? A lot of malware will pack themselves. It's a pain in the butt. And basically what they do is they take the malware and they obfuscate it a bit and compress it. And they use these custom packers. One of the common ones is UPX, which is native to Linux, and you can unpack them pretty easily. But most malware these days have their own custom packer. And it makes it real difficult to see what's going on because you can't see the code. You'll see the packer stub, but all this original content there, it's packed, it's obfuscated, it's almost encrypted. You can't see it. So there's a few things that we can do to detect packers. You have a tool on your VM called PEID and EXEinfo. They have signatures for packers that they'll run on your computer to see what's going on. Mandiant Red Curtain is a tool. It's on your Windows VM. It checks for entropy to see if it's packed or not. Or you can use PEView and just look at the PE header themselves. And in this section of the PE header, if you look at the virtual size and the raw size on disk, if those don't match, then it's a big indicator that it's packed. And then you can look into imports. Dependency Walker is a tool that looks at imports. So the imports are all the different Windows functions it's going to use to run. And if it has very little imports, most PE files have dozens and dozens of imports, but if it's only got like 6, then you're definitely packed because they need more than that. And oftentimes they'll have these two imports on them, get proc address and load library. Those are the imports that they'll need in order to find all the other ones. Unpacking packers, like I said, it's not fun. It's not fun at all. That's why memory forensics is so much fun, because it deals with all that for me. It just natively unpacks itself. Some people try to make tools to automatically unpack them, and they work for a while until they don't. It's a cat and mouse game again. You can dump the running processes with tools like Lord PE, or you can use something like a debugger, like OllyDebug, and just step through it step by step until he unpacks himself. But it's very boring and it takes a very long time, and so it's difficult. So once we've determined it's not packed, or say it's packed and we need to run it and pull it from memory, then we have something we can actually analyze. So we can look at the imports like we talked about. Different Windows functions do different things, so looking at the imports can give us a sense of what is it doing. If it wants to write a file, it's going to need certain imports. If it wants to do other things, it's going to need others. Tools like PEstudio and File Analyzer can show you good metadata. Sometimes they'll hide stuff in the metadata, like in the resource section or something like that. They'll hide a whole different payload. So we need to look at those to see that. And then just strings. Just looking at strings can tell you a lot. So on your Windows machine, there's a tool called bintext. Look at the strings, look for imports, look for traffic. So search for HTTP, search for an IP address, search for, you can do regex searches, so search for a regex that matches an IP address. Oftentimes you can find host and network indicators based purely just on the strings that you find. And if you don't find anything that's good enough for a signature, you can find enough that will start you down the path. So everything that we're doing here, from the networks forensics, the memory forensics, we all have something to start with. To go back to the payload we talked about, the Zeus knackers, we know the process it creates, we know it starts it as a service, we know there's a kernel portion to it. All of these start to work together, and we have to jump on back of each of them to get to the final goal. Mastiff is a tool on your SIFT workstation. It tries to automate this process a little bit. It will run through everything, show you all the imports, show you strings that it thinks are interesting and could be worked at more. And then we can get to behavioral analysis. And basically, we just run the malware in a sandbox. We collect the data, we rinse, repeat. We collect network data, we collect process data, and we can collect data from the system themselves. So here's a few of those tools. We showed you Fiddler. You can collect network data with that. It depends on how the malware is using the network data. Certain functions Fiddler will catch. If it's using different Windows functions, Fiddler won't catch it. Network Miner is a really good tool too. It will collect all your network traffic and parse through it really nicely. It's a bit resource intensive, so if you let that run on a virtual machine forever, your virtual machine will die. FakeNet is a tool I'll be showing off. It fakes your network, essentially. And all the network traffic will resolve to your loopback address instead of going out to the real internet. So you can kind of get a quick and dirty sample of what is it trying to talk to and what is it trying to do. And then TCP view is a sysinternals tool. It just shows you all your connections on your machine and from what ports and from what services, and to get a sense of what's going on. Process data, the biggest one is Procmon. Procmon looks at all your running processes and what they're doing, what files they opened, what files they searched for, what registry keys they touched, what registry keys they modified, and all that. Process Hacker is and Explorer is just a beefed up task manager. And there's some other things we can do like capture bat and flypaper. Flypaper will catch anything that tries to delete. So if the malware unpacks himself, it runs a batch file, which is very popular, and tries to delete the batch file after it's run, flypaper catches that, like flypaper, and so you can go back and look at that. So you can't delete anything without me knowing it. We went through Autoruns. Red shot is kind of like a snapshot of your system. It'll take a snapshot of all your files and all that, and then you take another snapshot after you've run the malware sample, and you can diff them to see what's changed. Did new files show up? Did new registry keys show up? Did all these things show up? Which brings us to our next exercise. Do live. So you have these all on your Windows VM. Let's find it again. So sysinternals, this is Procmon. It has a filter, so you have to filter out some of these things. And by start, he filters everything by default, so you have to remove those. I don't want to filter everything. Did that not save? Nope. The resolution on this. What are we going to do with here? Can I change this at all? Nope. There we go. So this is kind of quick buttons for registry, the file system, the network activity, and the process activity. So as you can see, your computer's doing a ton of stuff in the background. So all these things are happening. And you can exclude these. So I don't want to see services.exe. I don't want to see dllhost.exe and all these things. But we're going to stop it for now. And then let's look at network. Here's your fake net. So you have to run this one from administrator. And it's going to go up and say, well, I'm going to block you, and say, no, don't block me. And he's listening for traffic on all these different ports. And let's do that for now. So here's the malware sample we pulled from memory. And we got network running, so let's do Procmon. We can clear everything. We're going to start this, and then we're going to run the sample. So the sample's running. Oh. And look at that, Neckers. Oh, he's not going to let me do that. All right, so we're going to turn off Defender, like I told everyone, but I didn't do. Options. Use this program real time. So he's doing something already. So Windows command processor wants to run. I didn't run it. Must have been someone else. So we're going to say yes, go ahead. Running at the processes here. Do we have our sys host? Not yet. Then what we can do is we go back to Procmon. It will stop it. If you don't stop process monitor, it will just keep going and it will clog up a virtual machine because it's very resource intensive. But we'll find our process down here eventually. Process I-156 right here. So we can take that and say, let's include that. I just want to look at that. And we can filter between the different things. So let's get rid of them all. So let's look at network activity. Don't have network activity yet. But here's the process activity. So here's the operation, what it's trying to do. So right now he's loading up all of his imports that he needs, all the DLLs, and it gives you successful or not. And then he creates his thread, creates the process, and there he exited. He should have created a cmd.exe somewhere. Here's file system activity. So if he created a file, we'll see it here. If he read from a file, we'll see it here. A lot of the Zeus payloads, what you'll start to see is they're usually loaded by a downloader, and one of the purposes of the downloader is just to steal a bunch of credentials from you. So what you'll normally see is you'll see it hit a bunch of files looking for it to steal credentials. So he used to look for FTP programs and stuff like that. Anything he could think he could steal anything from. But basically, it's a lot of information, and just one by one, you just have to slowly piece through it and decide what's important and what's not. And you can start to get a picture of what is it doing, what is it trying to interact with, what is it trying to touch. And you get more information of what it's doing. So here is our fake net. Here's our web activity. You're definitely going to get legitimate activity here. So you can see I was trying to call out to Microsoft and stuff like that. But if we start to scroll through this, you can start to see the network connections it was trying to make. And it looks like Defender probably caught it, so he couldn't make any connections. But if you look at the strings on the payload, you'll find strings for Facebook.com. You'll find strings for Microsoft.com. And you would think that's an odd thing to find in a malware sample. But if you did this correctly without Defender running, because he can't hit out to the network, because FakeNet is faking the network, he will start to hit Facebook and Microsoft because he's trying to reach out and get a connection. He's like, where is my internet? Where is my network? And you'll start to see that in FakeNet here. So then all of this gives us more context for when we dive into actual code analysis. And we need that context because code analysis can be quite complex and difficult. You're looking at the code in assembly most of the time. You don't get the privilege of looking at it in the source code, and so you're obfuscated there a little bit. But if you have all these strings, if you have, I know it creates this service, I know they load a kernel driver, I know what the network traffic looks like, I know the different imports it's looking for, I can start to focus on just those things to see, okay, how does it create the network traffic? What does it require when it creates the network traffic? How does it create this service? What is it looking for? And then when you start to have those things, you can start to piece together what else it can do. So it's great that it does this in front of us, but what else does it potentially have the potential to do? And that's where you can see different if statements in the assembly code and see, well, if it had this file, it's going to go do that. Okay, well, let's create that file. If it's looking for a specific registry key, let's go create that registry key in our VM and then run it and see what it does differently. A coworker of mine had a sample. He just left the room. He would correct me, Edmotet, I don't know, something like that. And it created a registry key for when it infected a machine. And basically, what that did is it made sure that he didn't infect the same machine twice. Well, that's great as an AV, as creating signatures and stuff like that. So what we did is we tested it out. We took a clean virtual machine, and we created that one registry key on it. We ran the sample, and sure enough, he searched for that registry key. The second he found it, he deleted himself and just left. Just died. So it gives us more context. All right, we're almost out of time. I told you I've had a lot. So that's dynamic analysis. Gives us a context to go into static analysis. So what do we do now? Now we have enough information that we can start to piece together those questions. We know a little bit about what it does when it executes. We've seen host and network indicators that we can create. And we just kind of really scratched the surface of what we could possibly do. So now we just create signatures. And these are kind of the standards that have come out in the industry. Yara is a really simple one, just based on strings. Looks something like this. Metadata for the signature, and then you can just list all these different strings, and then some type of condition. So if this one shows up, then these two should also show up as well, or something like that. It's really good for scanning files. OpenIOC is more for host scanning. So you can scan for, like, it's going to inject into this process or this DLL, and it's going to create a file in this location that's this big or something like that. And you can do a bunch of and ors for an OpenIOC. And then Snort's probably the oldest of all these signatures. Well, it definitely is the oldest of all these signatures, and it's mostly in network indicators. And it's the ugliest of all of them, for sure. But pretty much you just look for content right here. So from some port to any port, bunch of information about what the signature is, and then look for this content as you're reading the network packets. And then that's where your IDS signatures come. Of course, I always give you the cheater's way, though, because this is introduction, and why not cheat? So Yara Generator is a tool on your Remnix distro. It will take a file, and it will try to automatically generate a Yara signature for you. Now, if you could probably guess that it doesn't do a great job, but it does give you kind of a stub of something to work with. You know, it tries to go through and say these things are unique, and you can create a signature based on this. Well, that's great, but it's not perfect, but it gives you something to start with. IOC Bucket is a website out there they collect all these different IOCs that you can download and have feeds for. But they do this one called virus stub generator. So if you have a virus total link for the analysis, you can submit it to this tool, and they'll do the same thing kind of as Yara Generator. They'll take all the information that virus total has about it and try to give you a stub of what an IOC for that file would look like, or could be, a start of something. And they also have an online tool called OpenIOC Online Editor, so you can create OpenIOC signatures online and test them there. And then once you're done with that, you can take the sample and spit it into a tool like Viper. Viper's on your SIFT distro, kind of tags the samples with different tags and all that. Crits, is the MITRE version of that, so you can store IOCs and threat intelligence, stuff like that. And that is basically an introduction to DFIR and malware analysis. So we're almost out of time. Just to show you a little bit of my sources on this, some really good books. Art of Memory Forensics is awesome. Practical Malware Analysis is a really good book, but take practical malware analysis and wrap it in memory forensics, and that's what you get with the Art of Memory Forensics. It teaches memory forensics, but it also teaches a lot about malware as well. The Malware Analyst Cookbook is an older one, but still good. There's Windows Forensics Analysis Toolkit is a good forensics one. And I can't go without saying about SANS, because I've taken the SANS courses, and they are great. They're expensive, but they're great. Some of the forensics ones from SANS. And then you got like 9 minutes to do the challenge and finish everything and do everything I just did. Great. No. Well, so what this was essentially is the DC801 group in Salt Lake. We used to do a lot of CTFs, and they used to be red team CTFs, just breaking into boxes and stuff like that. But I've been trying to test the waters of blue team CTFs. Would you be interested in doing a CTF where you do more of this stuff, you do more forensics, you do more malware analysis, trying to find flags and stuff like that? So, I mean, raise your hand if you'd be more interested in blue team CTF stuff. So that's what it's testing the waters for. Or doing something like the CENTCON Hacker Challenge Village. My intent was to do a whole nether incident and submit it to the Hacker Challenge Village. That was my intent until I ran up into the hospital. So I didn't get to that, but I hope, I know this was a lot, and we didn't get a lot of time to do the workshop portion of this. This isn't a great venue for doing the workshop with 200 people, but I will be around. I hope you do go through it and do it, and use those tools and everything. That's why you have the cheat sheet, so you can go back and do them. You have the files. You can download those files at any time. I will be around. I'll probably be hanging out in the Hacker Challenge Village, so if you have questions, you can tweet me. I'll be happy to help you out. Like I said, you still need to find the system driver, the malicious kernel driver that's loaded on that image. Um, there's a lot more you can do with the network forensics, so feel free to ask me questions and all that. 7 minutes, that's better than my run through before. Any questions? All right then. Just come grab me if you have any other questions, and I'll be around all week. Thanks.